saying is he is 6% ahead, okay?
Single digits.
Single digits. Why? Because everybody's focusing on the personal attack. People aren't focusing on the issues that matter to the voters.
With your percentages, because I want people to really understand. So last hour we looked at several polls. We do the politics average on that. Fetterman's up by 1 percentage point. And CBS News Battleground Tracker poll, Pennsylvania Senate contest narrows. This is just from a few hours ago. The most recent polling has them at barely 2, just under 2. And that Fetterman was up by 5 points last month. So, yeah, I don't see 6 anywhere. I know you can find an outlier, but that gets averaged in, and it's 2% or under. It is squeaky tight, Leslie.
That is Harris Faulkner. She's one of the straight news people over on Fox. She's not there to just give you conservative ideology. She's there to call balls and strikes. And she had an issue with the first woman who talked about this 6-point lead of Fetterman. She was not going to let that stand. Where the hell did you find that? I don't see that literally anywhere. Well, look, I don't know. Maybe the first woman does her research somewhere else. Maybe she saw it, for instance, on that program just a few minutes earlier, because that's where the result came from. On that show, they put up what I'm gonna say is a 30-foot long graphic of Fetterman up 6 points over Oz. And apparently, the first woman is the only one paying attention to that, I guess. No, look, the issue with this isn't that Harris Faulkner's overall point isn't accurate. The aggregate of all of the polls does have them being close. But if you look at this, you'll see that overall, yes, close and closer than it was, but literally every one of these polls is either tied or Fetterman is up. So I think it's acceptable to point out that Fetterman is leading, and it was the condescending nature of it. She held up her finger and said, now, I just wanna make sure that people understand. I don't know where you got this outlier. It was CNN, it was presented on your show, which you apparently don't watch. Literally, as you're sitting on the couch, you don't watch the show. So I don't know, just don't present it as such a like she is supposed to just be a journalist, a neutral arbiter of the truth. That's what they would say. I think that's BS. I don't think it actually exists. But when you present the information in that way, that condescending, smug tone, that it's ridiculous to think he could be up by 6, that is not being a neutral arbiter. That is opining, while still trying to maintain the idea that she is above all of these mere pundits. She floats above them. She's not weighed down by ideology or anything like that. And it just isn't the case in case after case.
Democrats are pointing to your own documents to tell Americans that you are preparing to cut entitlements. Here's what the headline is. House GOP decides slashing is the new saving. This year's Republican Study Committee's fiscal year 2023 budget openly calls for slashing and privatizing Social Security, raising the retirement age to 70 and ending Medicare as we know it. Now, I got a tweet from a viewer this week who says he's a Republican. He's very worried about you cutting his Medicare. He says it's a deal breaker and a betrayal by the GOP. So what's your answer?
So let's pause there for a second, because this is kind of fascinating, actually. That is Shannon Bream, an anchor on Fox, talking to Steve Scalise, and doing 2 things that you don't see nearly enough in either case. One is focusing on the actual substantive policy consequences of these midterms, the possibility that once again the right could be trying to destroy these quote unquote entitlement programs in Medicare and Social Security, and actually like presenting not only just what Nancy Pelosi is saying about it, but also right wingers apparently watching the show that are worried about it. This is very consequential. It's important for Steve Scalise to reassure the right wing base that, of course, they're not going to do anything like this. He's given an opportunity. Let's see how he addresses it.
You go to a restaurant, you're waiting an hour for a table and you're seeing a third of them empty because the government started paying people not to work. That drains programs like Social Security and Medicare. So let's strengthen those programs and stop them from going bankrupt. And let's also, by the way, stop the government getting in this business of paying people not to work when everybody's looking for workers right now.
But fair to say that pointing to your own documents, there are some changes to those programs that would happen.
There's not anything that we proposed in the Commitment to America. In fact, in the Commitment to America, we talk specifically about
the fiscal year 2023
in the Commitment to America, we talk Well, they didn't do a budget this year.
Okay, so that was shockingly good on the part of Shannon Bream. She's holding him to account for the things they've literally stated they want to do. Maybe not Steve Scalise personally. I don't know if it's his biggest priority, but the right wants to do it. That's what they're saying. The documents are out there. And he tries to evade saying they don't have a budget, which is not an answer to the question at all. And they're paying people to not work, which I always thought was a stupid thing to focus on. But even if you were gonna focus on it, it's 2022 now. It's actually the fall of 2022. You're referencing a couple of years ago. How is that an adequate response to the question, are you going to force people to grind out years more labor before they're finally allowed to put down their burdens? And he had nothing, Michael.
Even Steve Scalise doesn't have an answer to that. First of all, he's completely flustered by the fact that Shannon Bream is taking him to task over this, and he's having to answer questions when it's easier to speak to these people, and he's more accustomed to speaking to these people in very sort of broad brush ways. But what you are seeing too is when Republicans are asked about legislation below the catchphrase, right, below the commitment to America, which is not on its surface a bad campaign slogan. When they're asked to go underneath that, they don't really know what to do about it. And you're seeing that here. They are sloganeers. And when it comes to the meat and potatoes of what they're sloganeering, they can't back it up. And that's what Scalise is saying here. He can't even come up with the facts. And like you just said, John, this is old. These are old arguments. And I'm not an economist, but it seems to me if fewer people are working, that would be less taxing on Social Security. And not that it's a good thing that restaurants might have a lower hiring threshold now, et cetera. And that's a totally different conversation. But even the math doesn't seem to add up the way Scalise has it. And lastly, you talk about, I don't know how much Steve Scalise has to do with this. I don't want to single him out. Well, he is the minority whip in the House, and he's the person who's going to have to sell this to his caucus and the other caucus. So I would argue he has a lot to do with it.